let's begin. Welcome to Godot Unscripted, a podcast on the Godot ecosystem. Today on the podcast, we have Ivan. He's half of Nozomu Games and has been a game dev for about a decade now, starting in mobile and now on PC. He's an avid Ludum Dare participant and has a game, which spawned from a Ludum Dare prototype, releasing next month on Steam, Robot Detour. Ivan, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. And thank you for having me here. And I suppose you already kind of introduced me. I think you're more prepared than me. But yeah, it's basically about it. It's hard to say that I was like a proper mobile game dev. In the past, it was just like I started with mobile games, I suppose. I suppose like every game dev should like start, with the phase of like just doing some prototypes and like copying some other games, and it just happens that I was like into mobile games at the time, and it was just like for a couple of years, I suppose, not for many years, like for 2 years, I think, and then I had like this big gap in between mobile and desktop games, like I think 8 years I haven't made any games. Yeah, so it's kind of like a tricky question to like when people ask me like, how long have you been like doing video games? And I say, well, I started kind of doing games 10 years ago, but it's also kind of like only the last year. So,
Yeah, on and off, let's count. 1 year, 1 year there, 1 year here.
Yeah, I suppose like in total, like around 4 years, I suppose.
That's still pretty good. So you started out mobile, and that's where you made your first game?
Yeah. Like when I was in university, I got present from my parents. I got an iPad actually, and of course I installed a lot of like iPad games and whatever, and also like I looked into different applications, and there was this application called Codia, which is basically you can code games in Lua and then just play them on the same iPad. So, and it was like super cool. It doesn't have like any visual interface or editor, whatever. It's just like pure Lua scripts. Just like of course, you can just make some basic stuff with it. It's like it spawned my love towards game dev and actually towards programming. And I think I made something like 20 or 30 prototypes. So just like instead of listening to lectures, I just made games and let my like neighbors play my games. So it was pretty funny.
Oh, but you had playtesters then and everything. That's pretty good.
Yeah, like a full cycle, and even like I think a couple of games made it to like the App Store, like iOS. So because you can, with some bells and whistles, you can still like kind of publish games to iOS. So they were just like super simple arcade games, but it was fun experience.
I saw that. One of the ones I found was called Bury Me.
Oh,
I couldn't actually play the game, but I did find a video of a cat playing it. Could you describe the game and your experience developing it?
It was super funny. Like I will not lie, it's basically just kind of a copy of one of the early like game maker tutorials. There's like basically there was a tutorial where like guy who runs around the screen and bounces, and you need to click him and he bounces some other way. And we were just sitting with my friends and we said to each other, okay, we never like made a full cycle of game development. Let's just like take super simple concept and just do all the art and code and publish it and try to like kind of promote it. And we spent I think 2 weeks on it, and it blew up in our country. So we lived in Russia back then, and we had like I think it was 150,000. A lot of like it was like top one in Russia for like several months.
That's pretty good.
It was, like for a stupid game, like I think none of our other like prototypes of games were even close to this. So
the Russian Flappy Bird.
Yes.
How much money did you make off of that?
It's actually funny because like we didn't even think that like such stupid prototype would make any money. So we kind of lost. There was like no like in-app purchases or like any monetization or ads in the game, so we added them pretty late. We still made I think 2,000 euros or something like that. So
that's pretty good.
First project kind of was a key, yeah.
And that's 10 years ago? Nice.
Yes, it was 10 years ago. The times were pretty different from now, so now it's basically impossible to repeat it, but
yeah.
it was funny.
And would you say that your pause from games started immediately after this, or when did it happen exactly? And when did you begin again?
Well, it was funny because like after this success, I actually was at the time still in the university at my like third year or so. And after seeing like how easy it was and how cool it was to make games, I said to myself, okay, I want to make games. I don't want like to study in like, I studied something like astrophysics. It was still pretty cool, but like video games were cooler. And I just dropped out of university.
Holy shit, okay.
Yes. And I tried to make video games like for half a year. It was much harder and didn't work out. I was a bit stupid back then. And I needed to find like a proper job. And I started like some front-end development at the time. And that's basically why I stopped making games, because I needed to like fully focus on job as a front-end developer. It was pretty nice. I think I'm now like probably even a better front-end developer than game developer, because like I had like in total already like eight years, now already 9 years of proper experience, and I did lots of different stuff. I even like did some mobile applications, desktop applications, web applications. Now I'm doing actually interfaces for self-driving robots. So it's like super wild and cool.
Crazy,
but
yeah.
At first when I needed of course a lot of getting up your careers, like stepping up like from junior to middle to senior, and it was like so exhausting, and I didn't have like any energy in me like to do video games like after work. So I tried to, but yeah, you know how it goes.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. Very dedicated. And at what point did you start again with games in full force, with all the game jams, for example?
Yeah. So of course I tried some like also game development after work, and I like during the last 8 years I tried, I don't know, 6 or 7 different game engines. It didn't click for me like that first engine of like on iPad. It's kind of stupid, but for me, like I really need to connect with game engine, and like for it to like not be too intrusive in my like way of thinking about game dev and about game design, about how I want to orchestrate my like architecture of games. And like everything else was like too exhausting for me, and I didn't go past any like tutorials. And of course, you know, like I tried all the usual suspects: Unity, Unreal, Default, even like Love 2D, Cocos 2D. Like there were like a lot of weird.
I've never heard of those.
I had like my like reasons to try some of the like Love 2D. I tried because it used Lua, which I was familiar with. Like Cocos 2D, I tried because it's like close to mobile game development, which I also was kind of into. So, and actually, like the stars aligned last year, because last year there were 2 things basically. One, I moved to Germany. Much better here with work-life balance, you know, and
I know that, yeah, that's true. Let's go, Germany!
Yeah. And also, like, I looked at my current experience in front end, and I looked, okay, it's enough stepping up my career. I'm already like a senior, kind of senior, semi-staff, like engineer. It's enough. I can just stop like going up and up my career. And actually, I took a bit of an easier job. It works pretty nice for me. I still get enough money, and I have all like energy and time after work. It was exactly the time I thought, okay, maybe it's now time to go back to game development. Let's try what I haven't tried. And Godot was like next on the list. And so the stars aligned. I tried Godot. Already on the first day of trying Godot, I was already familiar with engine. I was familiar with GDScript. It looked a lot like Lua and Python that I already was familiar with. And second day, I was already making my like first game in 8 years.
That sounds amazing. Sounds like you found your balance and your happiness.
Yes.
Before we get into the present with current Game Jam games, I have a small detour question. I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to get into games from the very beginning? Like, do you have a point in your childhood or adolescence years where you're like, I love games, I love this about them?
Like, I think it's like there are like several things that push me towards indie games and game development. One is that I kind of started with games early in my childhood. I think already at 5 years I like played stuff like Doom, Duke Nukem, Neverhood, basically anything that my father. I didn't have actually my computer until 13, but he still let me play some video games. So
Duke Nukem as a parent.
yes, Duke Nukem. Yes, at like 5 years old, like it was super hard and super
The humor.
I was super afraid of everything.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I was
humor.
about to say it has some really dark stuff.
I don't know. Maybe it was like not the best thing to show me at the time, but there was still like some less popular stuff that I still liked. It was probably even some like it was like weird time at Russia didn't have like too much access to like some games from outside. It was either some Russian made games or pirated games or like some obscure games that I think nobody knows. I don't know who knows, like Game Plonk, something I played a lot. But I suppose Neverhood is something people usually know about. When I got my computer at 13, it was actually an iMac. And you probably know that iMac is like, it doesn't have too many games because it's an Apple. And also it doesn't have like too much juice in it for some proper games. It was that time when indie games started emerging. It was like 2008, 2009. And actually lots of indie games play them on my iMac just fine. And it was like, what was there? Like Worlds of Goo, Braid, Super Meat Boy, stuff like that. Classic. And actually a lot of course, Flash games, because Flash games could also run on any device. It was like that like golden era of indie games and of Flash games. And I looked at it and said, wow, it looks pretty different from like all those AAA games that like all my classmates played. It's like super creative and super cool ideas, and I really loved to play them. And it's kind of like first I started playing them, then I started reading like blogs of people behind them, like sunk into me that okay, I kind of want to make same games in the future.
Did you actually get to make a Flash game at any point?
No, I think I don't know why, but it's never actually came to my mind. Probably because I was too into mobile games back then. It was also like, also a golden era for mobile games. They were like, because now it's mainly like free to play and it's heavily like relies on how good the monetization is. And back then it was like the era of premium games, mobile games. I kind of decided to go mobile games at that time. And didn't have like time and energy to try Flash games, and now it's kind of too late.
Yeah, who knows? There's still hit games like 1 in a billion shot. Way harder nowadays without user acquisition, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Like it's still like in my, I suppose, DNA, all those like mobile and Flash games, and you probably can see with Robot Detour that it's kind of, I tried to push it for desktop, but it has a lot of like old school like of mobile and Flash games, at least like those vibes that it's like some pure joy experiments and like just super like based on just core like ideas. Even though I'm like for now targeting Steam, I couldn't get rid of those vibes from me, at least for now. Of course, people like ask, okay, when it will be like on mobile, please publish it on mobile. But yeah, it's unfortunately much harder nowadays.
Not yet. You gotta tell them after 1 million sales, you publish it on mobile.
True. I think maybe even for like faster than that, but I think we'll still discuss it a bit later.
Nice. That's a perfect segue, so we can start talking about Robot Detour. The game came originally from a Ludum Dare game jam, right?
True. It was actually funny. It was our first Ludum Dare like prototype / game. And it's funny that like when we started doing like games, I suppose together with my wife, we said, okay, what is the fastest way to like learn like game development, to like get some portfolio, to like when you're starting, you need a lot of stuff to catch up in knowledge, in social networking, basically anything. And game jams is like the best thing in that regard because it's super fast. You have like deadlines that are implied on you. You get like this drive that like you need like to finish in 3 days. You get that drive, like later from like ratings and playing other games. And it's still like our, I think, main drive of our studio that we try to participate in at least 3 game jams per year. So previous year it was 5 game jams. This year it's 2, but will be 3.
Okay, next year it's 1.
We'll see. And of course, when we like got into it, we thought we'll try game jams. We see how our like prototypes behave, and if they show themselves like they get some pretty good results, we like try to make a full game out of it. But like at that time, we didn't know like what was like the merit to success, like how could we understand like if the game was like would be successful enough. So we just said, okay, how many people participate in Ludum Dare? 2,000 people. Okay, if our game makes top 10 in any category, I think it's like good enough. And Robot Detour got actually like 8th place in innovation.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Like out of 2,000 games, and like 8th in innovation, and I think it was also 20th in like overall and in fun. It got like top 1%, and that's it.
Before we continue talking about Robot Detour, could you describe what the game is?
Oh, yeah, probably because like we've been mentioning it for like people listening. So it's a puzzle game. Initially, it was like an arcade puzzle game with a lot of like moving stuff, but now it's more like a pure puzzle game. I will not spoil the details, but yeah, it's more towards pure puzzle game. It's actually kind of unique puzzle game with a mechanic of a bending wire. So you play as a robot attached with a bending wire to a charger. So, and you go around levels, and you need to deliver batteries to wireless friends because they don't have power source. You do have, so you can deliver batteries to them, and you need to like go around the level, and you need not to touch with the wire like some enemies, and there are different mechanisms and some other funny mechanics and interactions. It's hard to like to describe in text, but it's basically the gist of it. So if some listeners have played some puzzle games, maybe you've heard of Filament. It's also like one of the games that came out recent years that also features like this pathfinding plus bending wire mechanic. But yeah, our game has a lot of like cool, interesting ideas on top of that, and like side steps with moving environment and moving enemies, some gears, rotating gears, and other stuff.
For sure. I really like it because at a glance, you see all the obstacles and all the hazards, and you think you know the path, but it happens frequently that as you move the wire around these obstacles and these hazards, you end up gimping yourself, and you really have to think it through what the correct path is. It's really fun.
This game is like more like unbound, freestyle, non-discrete, so it's like you have kind of infinite possibilities, and so you need like to really like, it's a different way of thinking about puzzles, so it's harder to think in steps. So you need to visualize a lot of stuff, experiment sometimes. For me, like as a game designer, I really like that this group of puzzle games is underrepresented and under-discovered. So there is like really lots of, as a game designer, lots of to experiment with and discover.
Sounds like you're a pioneer.
In a way, yes. Like it's a blessing and a curse because it's hard to tell what will work out and what players will like. But I suppose when game will come out, we'll see how it goes. At least from playtests, people do enjoy it, so we'll see.
That's a great metric. How did the original idea come about? Like you started the game jam. Did you already have the idea in mind, or?
Like the theme of game jam was delivery. Actually, we started with one of my like early mobile prototypes. If now I show you like that prototype and now you look at the current game, they have almost nothing in common. But it was a game that you play on iPad with 2 fingers, and there is a like wire drawn between 2 fingers, and you need to move 2 fingers at the same time, and you need to and you need to collect, and there are like a lot of moving dots on the screen, and there are like good dots that you need to collect and bad dots that you need to avoid. And so it's just like an arcade game with a wire that shouldn't touch bad like red dots. So you kind of see some resemblance, but it's like we had like a wild, I suppose, brainstorming session, and okay, how like it's a fun idea, but it's like on mobile, okay, let's just fix one point and you move on the other point. and then delivery. Okay, maybe you deliver something like, but you still have a wire connected. How do we make it more interesting? Oh, let's like make this wire bend around some environments. So it's usually goes like, of course it was not this straightforward. There were like, like branching passes during brainstorming. So it's usually like a wild ride for like several first
For sure.
hours. Yeah.
As I understand it, the actual idea for the game came first, and then the theme. Was the theme your idea as well, or did your wife jump in?
You mean theme delivery?
No, the
Oh,
robot. That it's a robot.
robot delivery. That's a robot. I think it's more like it came from my wife because she is like in our team. It's like two people. I'm game designer and coder, and she's like an artist and like how it's called, like art designer and narrative designer, whatever. So she come up like with some visual ideas. So I think it was her who came up with like all the robots and delivering to like your friends something. It like in Game Jam it was boxes.
Ah, okay. She sells it really well because the characters are really cute, and there's the initial comic when you
Oh.
start the game that really ties you to the world and you get invested.
Yeah. Actually, it was like a really late edition. We added it like, I don't know, 2 weeks ago because also during playtests, players didn't fully understand what was going on without that comic. It's like the battery is too tiny. You don't see like the delivery. You don't get that it's your friends. So like I asked her like to come up with some comic to like just sell the story, and okay, it's like it's the only story in the game because the game doesn't really need story later, but just for understanding of the like world.
The initial premise. I think it works beautifully, right? And it's so cute. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell her later.
Nice. With this game, what have been some of your biggest challenges?
Ooh, okay. So I think there are two biggest challenges with this game. Number one is actually that this is a puzzle game. And it's like it has different like emerging problems from this. It's a puzzle game. One, it's super hard to market and probably to sell because it's like oversaturated niche, I suppose, and it's more of a like mobile genre than Steam genre. So on Steam it's super hard to gain wish lists and any traction, I suppose. It's hard to like get YouTubers and streamers to play this game, and if they do play, it doesn't convert to wish lists that good. And yeah, it's that aspect of it being a puzzle game. And other aspect is that puzzle games are super hard to design and like to come up with, because you need to come up with lots of ideas of mechanics. You need to like filter out good mechanics and bad mechanics. You need to like have a hunch for like how good this mechanic will be and how many good levels it will produce. And you still need to come up with those levels later. And then you need to like come up with some clever level design and playtest. And I think among all genres, like across all games, level design and playtesting of puzzle games like the by far.
I agree with that because I tried designing this puzzle game, and one of the roadblocks I kept running into is designing levels that give the player that aha moment and at the same time teach them something. Because you as the creator or as the game designer, you already have these ideas in mind and you're not sure if players would go through that journey.
It's and actually like it's, you need to introduce always like new sub mechanics. You need to always like have like this constant as you said, path of evolving mechanics and using what player learned previously in the game. And still there is like this thing about difficulty curve that people are always talking about, because you don't want to like make it too hard too fast. And also like it's sometimes playtesters say, okay, this level is like, you get an easier level after a harder one, you need to change like the positioning. But it's always like a really hard balance. Okay, like I want to teach something before that level, And also, if you always each level is harder than previous one, that the player becomes like frustrated at some point because like he solved some hard level and he knows that the next one will be even harder, and it's like, do I really want to like take the next level? And you always need to have some kind of refreshers, and it's also like a super hard balance. And like the easiest way to deal with it is like sometimes to reset the difficulty with introducing some new like core mechanic or something like that. So that's actually the approach that we went to. So we have in our game, we will have 6 different worlds, and there are like 15 levels in each world. And first you get like 6 introductory levels, kind of easy. Then you get 6 advanced levels. And then you get also 3 bonus levels that are like, have like some funny mechanic that's like kind of connected to that main world's mechanic. And after that you get a new world with a new mechanic, so the difficulty is reset, and you need like to think like in a new way.
And how many mechanics do you currently have in the game, and how many mechanics have you scrapped?
Ooh. So there are I think around 5 core mechanics that are like super, like they change the way you are thinking about the game completely. So but there are a total of 20, I think, different mechanics in the game.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So some of them are minor, some of them are like not so minor, some of them just funny mechanics for a couple of levels. So some of the mechanics that I started with, but they were like not good enough. I think some of them are scrapped, some of them are still in the game in those bonus levels. So just an example, like, there was like I thought at first like cool idea of, okay, what if we make the length of the wire limited? So player like will need to think about like which path to take, so he gets enough wire. And like it was like one of my first ideas, and playtesters always suggested this mechanic, and it's like seems like a logical like mechanic to add. And then I started experimenting with it, and it became pretty fast obvious that it's like a really frustrating mechanic, because it's really hard to know beforehand if you have enough wire to what you're like to your solution. So you need to try your solution, and then wire is not enough, and you stop like 100 pixels before the finish. You're frustrated, you need to like unwind back, you need to try to think about another solution, and you need to try it out. And so a lot of other mechanics, you kinda can try to solve the level without moving, just thinking about the level. With this mechanic, you can't. So I scrapped this mechanic. It's still in the game. There are like 3-4 levels with this mechanic. It's like enough to try out a couple of cool interactions, but I hope not enough for player to get frustrated. Yeah, and there are like a total, I think, 6 different mechanics that are like just not good enough. They're just like not fun, didn't introduce anything like technically new to the game. So this game turned out to be more about like fun experiments than like some proper like grinding your like gears in your head. So if the idea didn't produce enough cool interactions or like interesting levels, I just scrapped it, and there's like a graveyard with 6 or 7 different ideas.
Graveyard. Sounds so morbid.
Yeah.
Did you do playtesting before in your previous games, or was this your first experience reliving playtesting with a puzzle game?
Ooh, I think it was my first proper like playtests, and because previously it was just like letting my friends play and just giving them like technically like basically build and saying, okay, please record your screen and tell how you liked it. But here I had actually 3 rounds of playtests. It was like technically 4. I suppose Game Jam was kind of like a early playtest of like just seeing like if players do enjoy the core idea. And then I had like pre-alpha playtest. Then I had tests during like demo last winter. And also I had this pre-release beta kind of playtests earlier, like 2 months ago, like in August. And it was like proper playtests on Discord with, I think, total of 40, 50 playtesters. So,
What have been your favorite moments and your least favorite moments from watching playtesters test your game? Ooh.
I think like my favorite thing was watching reading comments afterwards. Like I like left some fields of okay, so like what did you like the most and stuff like that, and actually like which world did you like the most. And each time there was at least 1 or 2 worlds for the player that they really liked. So I am happy that there was almost always something that players really enjoyed, because there are in the game like 3 kind of safe worlds that are like some like technically like safe mechanics from a game design that just work, and there are 3, let me say, experimental worlds that I knew that players would have mixed opinions on. And it was I really enjoyed that when players told their like most favorite worlds, it was always one of those 3 like experimental worlds. So I really loved that, like going experimental and trying some like wild ideas like paid out. Of course, like players didn't like all of those worlds, but it's like if it's a choice between like okay, kinda good game, like everything's like safe, it's like nice, and players like completely enjoying some of my ideas and maybe not liking some other ideas, I would choose the second one. So
For sure.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance to strike. You want the player to get that feeling, and the player thinks they get it when they clear something difficult. But as a game designer, you just want it to feel difficult. It shouldn't actually be difficult.
True. I did kind of trick. I started with like 2 basic worlds that are like kind of safe, and then I start introducing some weird mechanics. But yeah, it's like the game has accessibility mode, like it will have hints for all levels, and even like there is one dexterity world that I'll just let player completely skip if they don't want to.
Dexterity, ooh, that's super interesting. I can't wait to see.
It has moving enemies, and it was a really hard like decision for me if I wanted like to keep moving enemies in game at all. But I think it's like a discussion for another podcast. Dive deep.
A deeper dive.
Yeah. Going back like to question what I didn't like. I don't want to say like I didn't like that there were so many recordings, because like it's what basically helped me refine the levels. But everybody recorded several hours of gameplay, and there were like 40 players, and now you need to watch 80 hours of gameplay.
Oh, Jesus.
It helped me a lot, and but it was like a lot of like scrolling through the levels, and like at some point I knew like at what levels I need to pay attention to, but it still like was like dozens of hours of like scrolling players and playtests.
Yeah. Oh my god. But that's what makes you a dedicated game developer. And speaking about Robot Detour, I have a tangential question. While you were developing this game, you also participated in another game jam. And in that game jam, you created a game called Burn With Me, which was critically acclaimed. How did that feel while you were developing one game to get the idea to start working on another that did really well?
Yeah. So probably once again a small detour for our listeners. It was also a Ludum Dare game jam, and it actually happened right like 1 year after Robot Detour, like Ludum Dare. So it was they both were like April, I think, at least like April or May 2023 and 2024. And Burn With Me was a Devil deck builder game, so where you need to summon new cards for your deck. So you place your cards on the pentagram, you get enough points, you get new cards, you can also burn your old cards, and it's like super stylish, like devilish card game with like also several unique ideas. And it turned out to be super addictive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are right now almost 20,000 players on each year for it.
That's crazy.
And it's and like we got several like articles about this game on some media outlets, and there were like lots of like streamers and YouTube videos about this game at the time. And I even got like a tweet from how's it called, Daniel Mullings, like an author of Inscription, that he said that he played
Oh
that game
my
and
god,
he liked
really?
it.
Jesus.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Because he also participated in that Ludum Dare, and he actually got, I think, either second or first place with his game. So that's why I suppose he played this game. And it's like, I think if we will pitch this game or like make a trailer of this game, I think we'll need to put somewhere that like Daniel Mullins liked the
exactly. Creator of Inscription approved this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and like at the time, of course, we said, okay, we need to like make 2 games at the same time. We will make it, okay, like, and let's do 2 games. And we burnt out, I think, in 3 weeks trying to do 2 games at the same time. So we decided, okay.
Oh, Jesus.
So we have already like some rough estimations where we want to go with this game in the future. We have like already like visual, some hooks and cool ideas, and gameplay hooks and ideas. And we said, okay, let's release Robot Detour and then start with this game. Impossible to do 2 games at the same time. At least of the same caliber.
Yeah, no. That's exactly what I was wondering. Did the thought cross your mind to abandon or pause Robot Detour and go on to Burn With Me? Since it had that many like active players?
Yes, it actually was our like consideration in June, because we were like, Robot Detour was in kind of stale phase, I suppose, because we saw that like the game didn't get any traction, and the like development dragged on for a while, and I wasn't sure like if I already like liked the idea anymore. So it was like kind of like I don't want to say depression phase, but it like apathy, like a small apathy for the game. And I said, okay, maybe we just need to abandon it. And then I said to myself, okay, just for the sake of like consistency of learning how to finish a game, people were kind of like still watching us. So we had like still a game dev blog, more than 2,000 people just reading like my blogs there.
Jesus.
So it's I knew that like there were a lot of eyes on our studio, and just at least for the sake of like, okay, we need to prove ourselves that we can finish the game and not abandon. And there were like potentially some future investors or publishers like looking at us, and it's like, it's kind of a bad precedence, you know, like if we just abandon this game. We at the time decided, okay, even if we want to like dive into our second game, we need to just finish Robot Detour. So we made up our minds. We actually in July had like a internal game jam where we like made a 1 week super like trying to finish the whole basically game in 1 week. It didn't work out, but I think we finished like half of what was left to do. And then after that, we just basically steadily prepare the game for the release.
Nice. How has it been working with Godot after these couple of Game Jam games and now making 2 games that will commercially release on Steam, one of them next month?
Okay, so what hasn't changed throughout all these games? Like, I think we already made almost 10 games in Godot since last year of different calibers. And one thing that didn't change for me is that I still love that Godot is super flexible in a way that you can come up with any architecture that you want, and it will let you do that. And I really appreciate that, because like coming from like having like such big experience in software engineering, now I really like have my ways of thinking about like developing and building architecture and structures. The thing that did change is that like Robot Detour was our first big game, I suppose. I don't want to say big game, like at least a middle-sized game. And of course, I learned a lot of stuff about Godot and how to like organize stuff properly. And like there is stuff that works for game jams and doesn't work for bigger games. So I had some stuff that I needed to change. For some stuff, I was too lazy. There is still like a lot of like legacy architecture from game jam in final game. It's still like not a super big game. The total development cycle took, I think, around 1 year.
Yeah, it's pretty short. That's pretty good.
There is, I suppose, no other way about this other than just trying to do like game jams and then trying to scale your game, because even if those in like, it's basically, there is no point in me like telling what I did differently. It's, you still need like to try for yourself and see like what works for you and like what will not work out and how you can make it better, because I don't want to imply like my architectural patterns to anyone.
That's what I was about to ask, like what would be your advice for others, but I think you've put it pretty concisely.
Yeah.
Right? Try out things for yourself, go to game jams.
Yeah.
Find your own path.
It's still like, if you have time, it's still like a matter of a couple of evenings to change the architecture from like prototype sized to middle sized. It's just the way like, do you have enough like energy and dedication in you to do it? Like for main parts I had, for some like minor stuff I didn't. So for example, just one example, like I really laughed at some point that Godot implies there is like in software engineering, there is this like inheritance versus like composition. And Godot is really good with like composition. Like if you want to add new functionality, you can split it into different like nodes and add those nodes to like the core objects. For example, if there is like a player, there could like be a controller, animation controller, like undo controller, save state controller. And previously in like game jams, I would just dump everything in one file, like different functions, and it works all right. It works like perfectly fine. It's just like after, I don't know, 300 lines of code, you spend too much time like searching through the like file and editing it and stuff like that. And you just then split out all the logic. You add like a children components with all the logic and reference the parent node, and it works just fine and much easier to understand. Maybe even reuse, because like for example for save state I reuse logic for different objects in the game. So it's just one of the examples that I like picked up after like 1 year of experimenting. But it's like if somebody told me this 1 year ago, I would say like I'm perfectly fine with like writing everything in one file, and like it all depends.
That's me. I'm not a professional software developer.
Like if you're a solo developer, like
don't take advice from me regarding coding.
It's still like I have a lot of like unconventional things I do in code, but that work for me and it works for me much faster. So, for example, just it's not a like professional advice. I don't do any testing or any typing in Godot. I don't like use any types. I just do freestyle, like hardcore, like no types. Yes. So please don't burn me.
Okay, that's interesting.
Like some witch. Yeah, but for me, it's like how my brain works, and it's much easier for me, and it doesn't like slow me down. Yes. So it will probably harder for like if I get some in the future, some other like collaborators. I suppose now this podcast is like no kids allowed like to hear such heresy.
No kids allowed. Nah. This is how everyone learns. I think it's a perfect note to end on. So, Ivan, thank you so much for being here. Before we say goodbye, though, please go ahead and plug your stuff. Where can we follow you?
Cool guys have like Linktree or stuff like that, but like I have our website, nozomugames.com, and it basically has, I suppose, all the links. So it has link to Twitter. It has a link to our Discord, like where you can like play test our games and discuss them. It has a link to our like games, itch.io, like our Steam games. So basically everything that we discussed today.
That's super nice. Then we should also look forward to Robot Detour coming out this November 14th on Steam. And we should visit your website, Nozomu Games, which is Nozomu Games. Ivan, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you to everyone who stopped by to listen. This was Godot Unscripted.
Yay!
Cue free.
Thank you too.